Apple Strawberry Conserve is one of those lovely conserves that has the fruit, it has this lovely syrup that's somewhere in between like a breakfast syrup and a jam, and then it has nuts in it. This particular one has pecans. I've done it with almonds before, I've done it with walnuts. I like it with all of them, but I think pecans are my favorite. They go best with this one. I begin by making the syrup with 9 cups of sugar. I did say it was a syrup. And 2 cups of water. I'll then place these on the stove and bring them to a boil. Once I get it to 228 degrees, then it will be thick enough for me to start adding my fruit. My syrup is made, my strawberries have been mashed, so now I need to peel and core and dice up my apples. I'll need 6 cups worth. I really like using this little apple core slicer peeler. I feel like it does a really good job. Usually 6 cups will take me about 4 apples. Now I'll just go through and I'll remove the skin from the top and the bottom, which that misses. I'll check for any seeds on the inside, and if there's any bad spots on the outside or bruises, I remove them at this point too. My apples come right from the orchard, so they tend to have a few more of the bad spots, which is fine. Then I just slice straight down and it dices them up into nice tiny pieces for me. It's perfect. Sometimes that device will miss just a little bit of skin on the outside, and it's really easy to just cut that off. Now I'll add my 6 cups of apples to my syrup. I try to be careful so that I don't splash, because that's quite hot. And then my 3 cups of mashed strawberries. And I use a spatula for that because I don't want to lose any of it. I used frozen berries, so they mashed really well, but if I was using fresh, I could just dice them up small. And then I add 1/2 teaspoon of butter. And then I'll place it back on the stove, bring it to a simmer, and simmer it for 12 minutes. Now that it's at a nice simmer, I'll set my timer for 12 minutes. I then take it off the stove and add 1/2 cup of pecans and 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. I don't want to add the nuts beforehand or they'll get too soft, and the vanilla, some of that vanilla flavor will cook off. So now I'm ready to fill my 1/2 pint jars. I want to fill them up to 1/4 inch of headspace, which is the space from the top of the food to the top of the jar. The nuts tend to float, so I try to make sure that I get an even number of those in each of the jars. I don't want to have one that doesn't have any. Those are optional if for some reason there's an allergy or maybe just somebody doesn't have a preference for nuts. One of my daughters doesn't care for nuts very much at all, which is really sad because we have walnut trees and I love putting nuts in my food. So it's more sad for her than for anyone else. It's just a really pretty color. I always kind of feel like apple has such a mild flavor that anytime I add anything to it, it just kind of helps to disperse that flavor a little bit better. This actually makes a really big batch. I ended up with 13 half-pint jars today, which is great because this can be used for so many different things. So now what I'm doing is wiping off the edges of my jars, and I'll do that just so that if any of that syrup got on the edge, that it won't interfere with the seal. And then I'll place my lids and rings on until they're fingertip tight. This allows just a little bit of air to be able to escape, which creates the vacuum, which actually is what makes the seal happen. I try to work pretty quickly because everything's really hot at this point. I'll then place these in the boiling water bath and process them for 10 minutes if at sea level. I'm at 1,200 feet, so I'll go for 15, but I won't start the timer until after it begins a rapid boil. Now that the timer's gone off, I'll remove the lid, turn off the heat, and let it cool for 5 minutes. I then place my jars on a heat-resistant surface about 1 to 2 inches apart, just so that they can cool a little bit faster. And then I'll let them rest for about 24 hours. This gives them a chance to get a good seal. You can tell if they're sealed because the little button that's in the middle of the canning jar depresses down. So if it hasn't depressed down, then I'll put it in my refrigerator and I'll use it right away. But if it seals well, then I'll put it in my pantry, which is a cool, dry, dark location, and I'll use them in the next 1 to 3 years. Let's see, time for the taste test. I'm gonna see if I can find a nut for myself, because I like that. It's so good, guys. There's my phone going. It's super sweet because of obviously the syrup and the strawberries and apples, but then you hit those nuts and you get that little bit of nutty goodness that just offsets it so well. And it's kind of a thick syrup, but not as much as a jam. So I would say that this would be perfect for eating on waffles, ice cream, pancakes, you know, you name it, anything you need a syrup on. Also, it would be good in oatmeal. Anything with nuts would be good in oatmeal, I think.